Hi, my name is Laurie Groh. I'm co-owner at Shoreside Therapies, and today we are introducing Kristen Holmes. She's a new therapist at Shoreside Therapies, and we're so excited to have you, Kristen. And I
Oh,
just
thank
want to
you.
get to know you a bit. So, and hoping our audience will too. All right. So, Kristen, we want to hear all about who you help. So, share a little bit about your ideal client. Who tends to be the people that you see?
So my ideal client, I kind of see everyone, which is great. I have a lot of experience working with kids, ages 5, all the way up to teenager, 18. But then I also have experience working with individuals as well. So typically the kind of client that I see, you are probably experiencing a lot of stress, either around just normal life things that are going on, transitions, parenting, any kind of changes that are going on in your life. Maybe it's a busy season. I tend to do a lot of work with people who also struggle with anxiety and depression, as well as people who are coming in with trauma. So whether it's little t trauma, like we call it, or big T trauma, I have experience working with both. And yeah, those tend to be the people that I see. I do a lot of individual work, but I can also work with parents or caregivers, foster parents. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's a lot of people you can help, right?
People.
Yeah. So for those that might not know what little t versus big T trauma, could you just speak just a little tiny bit about that?
Yeah. So trauma is actually defined as any upsetting or confusing event, right? I think we tend to think of trauma as like this big trauma of like, I've had a loss in my life or something that's happened that is life-changing or life-altering. And so for little t trauma, that can be anything from loss of a job to maybe a loss of something that feels normal for you, right? So you might even see little t trauma around, maybe you have a really high stress or anxiety trigger around certain things, right? Parenting, have a trauma that's coming in as you're becoming a parent, right? Or you're starting a new job or something along those lines. So those would be little t traumas. Those things would cause some disruption to your life, but it's not necessarily something that is debilitating, right? So big T trauma is more along the lines of what we see in PTSD, right? So in a specific event that's happened, and 5-6 months later, you're still experiencing a lot of trauma or response related to anything that's familiar to that experience, right? So this is where you would see like deaths in the family. COVID has been a huge trauma for a lot of people, right? Because not only did it affect just our everyday life, but it's been long lasting, right? It seems like we're still experiencing stuff related to the pandemic. And so those kind of traumas, it might be childhood trauma, right? Where you experienced abuse, or whether physical or emotional abuse, right? There might be some neglect there. So that's why I end up doing a lot of work around foster families and families who have finalized adoptions, because we know that a lot of trauma and things like that can happen. So hopefully that gives you a good definition.
Yeah, that is so helpful to know that there's some differences between the two. That little t trauma are those things that have a massive effect on you and are very stressful events, and then the big T traumas are more like the life-threatening or passing on of somebody. That's incredible. And Kristen, you specialize in working with families with adoption, finalizing adoption and foster kids that have families that have foster kids, and that is an incredible resource for all those families out there that might be struggling. So that's very, very cool, and we're excited to have you help with that.
Yeah.
All right, so next one, what's your general philosophy or approach to helping? So one of the big questions a lot of people might have is, are you more directive or more guiding in your sessions?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this question in the fact that I think I bring a good balance of both, right? I think it's really important to first talk with you when you're coming in for your first session. What are you looking for, right? Because I think there is a place to allow the client to just explore and kind of help with that. And me come in as someone who was curious and can kind of ask the questions to help you explore some things that you're coming in for, right? But then because of the family work that I've done, and specifically the parenting work that I've done, sometimes that requires a more directive approach on my behalf, right? You might be coming in looking for specific skills or specific approaches to parenting, or how do I, deal with this difficult teenager that I have, right? So in that instance, we're going to do a lot more directive work, right? So I think in general, I tend to be more guiding in the beginning, especially because we tend to make a phone call or reach out to a therapist and we have this one thing in mind that we really want to work on, right? And then you get into the therapy office, and as you start talking in that initial session, you realize, oh, well, this is actually connected to this, or, oh yeah, I'm also experiencing this in this environment, right? So I think for me, I just like to bring a good balance of both until we get to know each other, and then kind of talk about, well, what are our goals? What are we looking for? Right.
And I think too, right, that beginning part is so important, of relationship building and exploring, so that you know as much information as possible before there is any of the direction. That piece is super important, to have clarity there and what the client wants. So I think that's an amazing balance to have. And also, when somebody is coming in as a family or a couple, they're going to need some more concrete directions. They might not be coming in to explore anything. They just want to know, what are the skills? Help me with these skills.
Right. And that's why I've done additional trauma training, specifically in working with the family system. So we call it family systems trauma, right? Because in that instance, you're coming in and you're wanting a therapist to explore those really tender areas. Right.
Yeah.
So in that work, there's specific approaches and interventions that I use, and you're actually practicing and rehearsing skills in the therapy session that you can use at home. Right. That is going to be a more directed work, because you're learning new ways, like you said, to kind of approach things. Right. So like I said, it just kind of depends on what you're coming in with.
Yeah. And it takes practice, and it feels a little strange and awkward at first. So you sort of have to try it out. How did that sound? And, that's kind of the fun, lighthearted part sometimes of, oh, I can tell that didn't come out the way I meant it to come out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So next question. Let's move on. Oh, your strengths as a therapist. So why don't you share a little bit of your strengths as a therapist?
Yeah. So one of the strengths that I have as a therapist is I really care about listening to the client, right? So when you're coming in to see me, in the beginning, there might be a little bit of talking and questioning as we get to know each other, right? But I am coming to you and wanting to hear about you and your life, right? And so I work really hard to create an environment that's conducive to that, right? Because it can feel really awkward, especially if this is your first time coming in for therapy, right? It can feel really awkward because you're like, I don't really know how this works or what I'm supposed to say, or if I can say this, right? So I think that not only do I provide a really good listening ear, but I also am really gentle with how we approach things, right? I'm very careful to be empathic, right? And understanding. And I don't want to push you. I think there is time for there to be challenge, right? But I also really value the therapeutic relationship and the rapport, the trust that we need to be able to do that. And so I think that's definitely one of my strengths, is building that rapport with clients. And I think too, I've learned that because I work with teenagers, right? And I work with middle schoolers and other kids, right, who may not be comfortable with therapy, or they may be looking this is something that we're being forced to do, right? And so I really value getting to know the client. What are your interests, right? It's not beyond me to use to get a kid or get a young adult to engage in something that they are into, right? I've gone as far as to use Fortnite, and characters from Fortnite, not necessarily playing the video games, but getting into the head, right, of the client and really getting to know, like, what is it about you that you're good at, right? What do you love to do? Because that's something that is common, right? So really just building that rapport with a client, and that listening too.
Right. And just being connective, right? And that's what that's showing when you're showing interest in, especially with teenagers and middle schoolers. They're feeling at that stage maybe like, no one's really listening to me. There's a lot of structure, a lot of rules, a lot of them listening or needing to listen. And so having that space to be able to talk about something they might want to for a minute is really valuable. The other thing too, Kristen, and it might not come across via video, but you have this really warm and calm presence that I think is also just important to note, that being in the room with you feels so comfortable. And I think that's a needed quality as well, because again, especially in that first session, it's uncomfortable. I feel like almost everyone walking in says, like, I'm not quite sure if they've never done it before. Like, what is this going to be? Yeah,
absolutely. And, as a therapist, I've also gone through my own therapy, right? And so I know what it feels like to really be missing that connection with a therapist. And if you're missing that, there's very little that you're willing to do and work on and process in the room because of various reasons, whether you're not feeling just connected or whether you're not feeling that warmth, right, from a clinician. But I also think if you don't feel that there's some sort of thing that you're getting, right, it's hard to put into words until you actually feel it. But if you don't feel like that therapist is present, I think that's what it is. There's an important part of that you want that therapist to be present, right, and in the room with you, and also willing to sit with you, right, and not necessarily give advice, but more in a way of creating space, right. And so I think that that's probably what that comes from, is just, I want to make sure that this is your time, right. I want to make sure that you feel like you can sit here with me, and whatever we need to talk about that day, we can talk about, but then you can also leave feeling a little bit better than when you came in.
Right. Which is always a great feeling, to kind of walk out and here I go. Yeah. Like a nice deep breath. All right. So Kristen, last question, but tell me a bit about like the results. So we got an understanding of how the therapy session works with you. What do your clients expect to see after? We know that first session probably a relief, and probably all the other ones some sort of relief, but not all sessions are like that. Sometimes there's tough ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about the
And
result?
especially because I do some trauma work, right?
Mhm.
And so one thing that I really want clients to feel and have when we're finishing up is one, self-love and acceptance. I think that we are flooded with things that we should do, should be. Um, we have a lot of, especially in our society, we have a lot of expectations that we're trying to
Yeah.
meet, whether it's expectations from ourselves that we're putting on ourselves or expectations that are coming from the outside, right? And it can be really hard to be in touch with who you are as a person.
Yes.
So, and really be considering that, right? As you're growing and as I always think of it as life as a journey, right? And so as you're kind of moving through life and you're growing, I want clients to feel that that they are really truly in touch with their self, just their inner self, right? Um, the other thing that I hear from clients a lot too when we're wrapping up is I feel like this has been an experience that I'm walking away from, that I understand myself a little bit more, right? Not even a little bit more, but I understand myself in a whole different way than when I
Right.
came in,
Right.
right?
Right.
That I'm able to connect things differently than I was before. Like maybe you're walking away with, you want skills, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think all of those things are really important. But if you don't have the confidence and the
Yeah.
self-esteem to be able to live and walk and breathe in those skills, then I think that's something that is even more important,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
in coming with me, that's something that we talk a lot about is your own version of yourself, how you perceive yourself, right? Um, and then also, I think just knowing that you're enough, right? That no matter what you're bringing in and what your experiences are, right? Especially in everything that we have going on, that you're enough, that whatever you bring to the table is a gift that you have, as a strength that you have. And so I want clients to walk out feeling empowered, right?
Right.
That
Right.
takes time. That just doesn't happen in that first
Right.
session.
You're right.
And
Right.
probably about 3 or 4 sessions in, you're probably like, nope, I don't feel empowered. I don't feel good, right? There's a lot of stuff that's coming up, right? But it's kind of like that monster under the bed, right?
Yeah.
When you're a kid and you're scared of the dark and you feel like there's a monster under the bed or in the closet, it's helpful to turn the light on first,
Right.
because
Right.
then you know exactly what you're facing, right? And so I
Right.
want clients to feel like, oh, I turned the light on and it wasn't as scary, or I feel better now that I actually like faced it, right?
Right.
So the
Right.
empowerment and the confidence to face those things that seem really scary in the beginning.
Yeah, and they would be doing something different, right? With the light on and
Mhm.
looking at it and not as
Yep.
scared, you're going to react different than if you're feeling
Yep.
scared in that moment. So,
Yep.
Kristen, thank you so much for talking with me. Really, really great interview today. And I want to let everybody know that they can reach out to Kristen. She's going to be starting after Thanksgiving. She has some openings. So feel free to reach out to her whenever you want. And you can go to our website at shoresidetherapies.com and you'll find her contact information there. Thanks again.
Yes. Thank you so much. I can't wait to get started.
I know. Me too. All right. Bye, Kristen.
Bye.